Oida, I refused to split bill equally and instead got my own bill separately because my friends eat a lot. So, I 22M have these two friends, Mike and Jake. We've been tight since high school like, we've gone through all the dumb stuff together, skipping class, late night video game marathons, road trips, the whole deal. For the most part, they're chill, fun guys to hang with, and I genuinely value the friendship. But here's the thing, they both have massive appetites. And when I say massive, I mean these guys eat like they're trying to survive a week-long fast between every meal. We're talking at least 1.5 times what I'd normally eat, but honestly, it feels like more than that sometimes. At first, I didn't think much of it. We're dudes in our early 20s, and I get it, people eat a lot, especially if you're active or have a fast metabolism. When we went out to eat, it just seemed natural to split the bill 3 ways. We'd hit up some burger joint, order our food, and when the check came, Mike would say, "All right, let's just split it." And yeah, I agreed, because why not? That's what friends do, right? Share the bill, no drama. But after a while, I started to notice a pattern, a really uncomfortable one. Every time we went out, Mike and Jake were ordering way more food than I was. I'm talking appetizers, main courses, extra sides, and dessert, like it was some kind of food competition. Meanwhile, I was sticking to something more reasonable. Like, if we're at a burger place, I'm ordering a regular burger with fries, no appetizers, no extra sides, no let's get wings for the table. I was eating like a normal person who doesn't need a mountain of food to be satisfied. But these guys, they'd go all out. Mike would get something like a double bacon cheeseburger, a huge plate of fries, and maybe even onion rings on the side, because apparently one side isn't enough. And Jake's the type to order the largest thing on the menu, like ribs or a steak, and then pile on mashed potatoes, mac and cheese, and who knows what else. I swear, watching them order was like watching a kid in a candy store. It was wild. And don't even get me started on the drinks. I'd grab a soda, maybe water if I was feeling like not drowning in sugar, but they'd order large sodas, sometimes refills, and then maybe a milkshake after. I could almost feel the bill climbing higher and higher as they rattled off their orders. And then, without fail, the bill would come, and Mike would lean back casually and say, "Let's just split it 3 ways, yeah," as if that was totally reasonable. And I'm sitting there, looking at the bill, and realizing that they've just consumed twice as much food as I have, but I'm being asked to pay for a third of it. I'd look down at my plate, a regular-sized meal, maybe $10, $12 tops, and then glance at their side of the table, which looked like the aftermath of a Thanksgiving feast. And I'd think, how is this fair? But I'm not the kind of guy who wants to stir up drama over a few bucks, especially with friends I've known for years. So at first, I just sucked it up and went along with it. I didn't want to seem like the cheap guy who's always calculating the exact amount he owes down to the penny. I figured it was only a few extra dollars each time, and I didn't want to come off as a jerk. Plus, I thought maybe this was just a one-off thing. Maybe they were just extra hungry that day or something. So, I kept quiet and handed over my card like it was no big deal. But the thing is, it wasn't a one-off, it became a pattern. Every time we went out, they ordered way more than me. Appetizers I didn't ask for, desserts I didn't touch, extra sides I didn't even look at. And yet, every single time, Mike would hit me with the same line, "Let's just split it." It started to really bug me. I mean, why should I be covering for their ridiculous meals when I was just ordering a burger and fries like a normal person? It's not even like they were unaware of it. They'd order wings for the table and say something like, "You gotta try these, man." But I didn't want wings. I wasn't planning to eat them, and even when I did, it'd be 1 or 2 at most, just so I wouldn't seem rude. But now, I was expected to pay for a whole appetizer that they devoured while I picked at a couple of pieces. And don't even get me started on dessert. I rarely order dessert when I'm out. I just don't have much of a sweet tooth, but Mike and Jake, oh, they always ordered dessert. And not just one to share, either. Each of them would get a giant brownie sundae or a slice of cheesecake, and there I was, sitting awkwardly, waiting for the bill while they polished off their third course. After a couple of months of this, I couldn't help but feel like I was getting ripped off. I mean, it's one thing if we're all eating roughly the same amount and splitting the bill, but this was a whole different level. They were treating these meals like buffets, and I was getting stuck with the bill for food I barely touched. I started dreading going out to eat with them, knowing exactly how it was going to go down, me ordering something reasonable, them going all out, and then splitting the bill like we'd all eaten the same. I knew I had to do something about it, but I didn't want to come off like a penny-pinching jerk. So, I kept it bottled up, hoping maybe one of them would notice and say, "Hey, you don't eat as much as we do. Let's split the bill differently this time." But nope. That conversation never came. Fast forward to a few weeks ago, I realized I had to do something, or this was going to keep happening indefinitely. I was starting to feel ripped off every time we went out. No matter how much I tried to push the annoyance aside, it kept creeping back up. I'd sit there, staring at the pile of food they'd ordered, mentally calculating how much of that bill wasn't even mine. And each time I handed over my card, it felt worse. It wasn't about the money anymore, it was the principle. I was paying for food I didn't even eat, and it was starting to seriously bug me. So, I decided I needed a plan. Nothing too dramatic, I didn't want to risk the whole money talks ruining friendships thing. I just wanted a way to avoid this awkward bill-splitting routine without coming off like the cheap guy in the group. After thinking it over, I came up with a bit of a strategy. The next time we went out, I was going to act like I wasn't hungry, keep my order small, and avoid the whole massive bill scenario from the start. If I barely ate anything, there'd be no logical reason for them to expect me to split the bill equally. Simple enough, right? So, we end up planning to meet at this diner we'd been to a few times before. It's nothing fancy, but the food is good, and it's the kind of place where Mike and Jake tend to go all out with their orders. Perfect setting for my little strategy. Before we even got there, I had my excuses locked and loaded. I was going to play it cool, make it seem like I'd already eaten a big lunch or something, so I wouldn't need much. That way, when the bill came, there'd be no reason to expect me to split it 3 ways. As soon as we sat down and the server came by, I hit them with my best, "I'm not really that hungry" excuse. I told them I'd had a late lunch, so I was probably just going to order something small, maybe a side salad or something light. I even threw in a casual, "I might grab a bite later if I get hungry," just to make it sound more believable. Mike and Jake didn't seem to care. They were too focused on the menu, probably planning their next feast. And for a moment, I thought I was in the clear. But of course, as soon as they ordered, it was the same old story. Mike went all out, ordering a massive double cheeseburger, fries, and because why not an extra side of onion rings. Jake, on the other hand, went for the ribs. Not just regular ribs, though these were ribs with a mountain of mashed potatoes, a side of mac and cheese, and a drink that could double as a small aquarium. I swear, when the food arrived, his plate looked like something out of a BBQ competition. Meanwhile, there I was, sitting with my tiny side salad, trying not to feel awkward. The difference between their meals and mine was ridiculous. It was like we were eating at 2 completely different restaurants. They were going to town on their feed, chatting away, while I sat there picking at my lettuce, trying not to feel like I was part of some weird joke. But the whole time, I was hungry. Not just I could eat more hungry, but that gnawing kind of hunger that makes you feel like you could devour everything in sight. I'd been pretending I wasn't hungry all along, but let's be real, I was starving. I'd been waiting for this dinner for hours, and the sight of Mike's giant cheeseburger and Jake's ribs was making it worse. But I knew if I caved and ordered something in front of them, I'd be stuck in the same position again, splitting the bill equally for food I didn't eat. So I stuck to my plan, pretending to be satisfied with my salad and nursing my drink to make it seem like I was occupied. Here's where things got interesting. About halfway through their meal, I casually excused myself from the table. I told them I was heading to the restroom, but instead of actually going there, I made a beeline straight for the cashier. I'd spotted a sandwich on the menu earlier that I really wanted, so I figured I'd just buy it for myself, separately, without them knowing. That way, I'd get to eat something decent, but I wouldn't be involved in their ridiculous feast or have to deal with splitting the bill. I placed my order for a turkey club sandwich and fries, nothing fancy, but exactly what I'd been craving, and paid for it right there. The cashier handed me my receipt, and I felt this weird sense of satisfaction, like I'd outsmarted the system. I'd be able to eat what I wanted without getting dragged into their endless food binge and bill-splitting nonsense. I waited a few minutes for my food to come out, and when it did, I headed back to the table, sandwich in hand. I could see Mike and Jake were still working through their mountain of food, barely noticing that I'd been gone longer than usual. I sat down and casually said, "You know, I started feeling a bit hungry after all, so I went ahead and grabbed this." Jake shot me a look, kind of like he was surprised, but then shrugged and went back to devouring his ribs. Mike didn't even blink, he was too busy drowning his onion rings in ketchup to care. I took a bite of my sandwich, feeling pretty pleased with myself. I was actually eating something I wanted, on my own terms, and for once, I wasn't going to be paying for their excessive orders. For a second, I thought I was in the clear. They hadn't made a big deal about it, and I figured that when the check came, it would be obvious that I had bought my food separately. No drama, no awkwardness, just a clean break from the whole bill-splitting routine. But, of course, that would have been too easy. When the bill finally came, Mike grabbed it, took a quick look, and said, "All right, let's split it 3 ways. Yeah." I paused for a second, not even sure if I heard him right. Like, part of me was genuinely hoping he was just messing with me, maybe pulling one of those classic Mike jokes where he pretends to be serious but then laughs it off. But no, there was no joking tone, no smirk, nothing. He was serious. My mind went into overdrive, trying to wrap my head around the fact that despite me clearly ordering my food separately and paying for it in advance, they still expected me to split the bill. It was like they hadn't even noticed or, worse, didn't care. For a split second, I thought about just going along with it, like I always had. Maybe it would keep things from getting weird or tense. But then I remembered all the other times I'd done that, sitting there feeling like I'd just gotten played. And this time was different. I'd planned ahead, gone out of my way to make sure I didn't get stuck in that situation again. So, instead of biting my tongue like I usually would, I just looked at Mike, then Jake, and said, "Nah, I'm not splitting this. I bought my food separately. I'm not paying for your meals." The look on their faces was priceless, like they were both genuinely shocked I wasn't going along with the usual routine. Jake, in particular, gave me this look like I'd just broken some kind of unspoken bro code. He raised an eyebrow and shot back, "Come on, man, we always split the bill. What's the big deal?" And that's when I knew it wasn't just about the money for them, it was like this thing we'd always done. And in their minds, it had to stay that way, no matter what. But this time, I wasn't going to fold. I'd had enough. I'd been paying for way more than my fair share for months, and it wasn't fair. So, I didn't back down. I laid it all out for them, right there at the table. "Look," I started, trying to keep my tone calm, "you guys eat way more than I do, and it's been happening for a while now. Every time we go out, I'm barely eating half of what you are, and yet I'm expected to split the bill equally. I'm not comfortable with it anymore, it's just not fair." The second the words left my mouth, I could feel the atmosphere shift. You know when you say something, and you can just tell it's about to get awkward. Yeah, that's exactly what happened. Mike immediately went on the defensive, like I'd just attacked him personally. He threw his hands up and said, "It's just a few bucks, man, why are you being so uptight about it? We've always done this, and it's never been a problem before." The thing is, I knew it wasn't just a few bucks. Sure, maybe it was $10 or $15 here and there, but when it's happening every single time, it adds up fast. And even if it didn't, it was the principle of it. I didn't want to keep subsidizing their feast-sized meals when I was barely ordering anything in comparison. So, I shot back, "I'm not trying to be uptight, but it's not just a few bucks. I've been paying for what feels like half of your meals for months now. I don't see why I should keep covering for anyone else, especially when I didn't even want half the stuff you guys order." Jake, clearly annoyed now, leaned back in his chair and gave me this look, like I was being the unreasonable one. "We're friends, man. We've always done it this way. Why make a big deal about it now?" That's when it hit me, it wasn't about the money for them, it was about the routine. This whole bill-splitting thing had just become part of how we operated, and to them, it wasn't something to question. They didn't even think about the fact that they were eating way more than me, or that I wasn't cool with paying for stuff I barely touched. To them, it was just what we do, but I wasn't down for it anymore. I wasn't trying to be a jerk, but I wasn't about to get taken advantage of either, whether they realized they were doing it or not. I took a deep breath and tried to explain it one more time, hoping to make them see where I was coming from. Look, I get that we've always split the bill before, but things have changed. You guys order way more than I do. I'm fine paying for my own food, but I'm not cool with covering for extra sides, desserts, or appetizers that I didn't even touch. It's not about the friendship or the money, it's about fairness, and right now, this just isn't fair. At that point, I could feel the tension hanging in the air. Mike crossed his arms, clearly annoyed, and muttered something under his breath about me being cheap. Jake, on the other hand, was more vocal. He let out this frustrated sigh and said, "Man, it's not that serious. We're friends, we look out for each other. What's a few bucks between friends?" I shook my head. It's not about the money. It's the fact that I'm constantly paying more than I should. You guys eat twice what I do, and I'm done pretending that's okay. I'm just asking to pay for what I eat, nothing more. It got real quiet after that. The vibe was totally off. I could tell they weren't happy, and to be honest, I didn't feel great about it either. But at the same time, I know I was standing up for myself in a situation that had been bothering me for a long time. We all sat there for a few awkward minutes while the server came back to collect the bill. Mike handed over his card without saying much, and Jake begrudgingly threw down his share. I paid for my own food, just like I'd said I would, and that was that. We finished the meal in silence, no more jokes, no more casual conversation. The whole thing felt weird and uncomfortable, like something had shifted between us. When we finally left the diner, Mike and Jake said a quick goodbye, and we all went our separate ways. No let's hang out next weekend, no see you later, just an awkward parting. After that weird, tension-filled meal at the diner, things between me, Mike, and Jake had definitely shifted. For the first time in years, there was this uncomfortable distance between us that hadn't been there before. Usually, after any hangout, we'd be planning the next one on the spot like it was just automatic. But after that night, silence. A few days passed, and I hadn't heard from either of them. I couldn't shake the feeling that the whole bill-splitting thing had left a mark on our friendship, something we all knew but didn't want to address directly. A couple of weeks went by, and I was starting to wonder if maybe we were done hanging out as regularly as we used to. But then, out of the blue, Mike texted me. It was casual, inviting me over to his place for a football game on Sunday. He mentioned that Jake would be there too, and that they were planning to make it a whole thing with snacks, drinks, the works. Honestly, I felt a little relieved when I got the text. I figured this was their way of smoothing things over, maybe trying to get back to how things used to be without dragging out any more awkward conversations about money. It sounded like a good chance to just hang out, have some fun, and maybe let that diner incident be a thing of the past. So, I said yes. I was looking forward to the game, not just because it was a big one, the type of game you don't want to miss, but also because it felt like a fresh start with my friends. Sunday came around, and I headed over to Mike's place, feeling optimistic. When I got there, Mike and Jake were already in full-on football mode, wearing their team jerseys and talking stats like nothing had ever happened. The table was loaded with food. I mean, these guys went all out: pizza, wings, nachos, chips, dips, beer, sodas, and even some random things like fancy cheeses and charcuterie boards, which was pretty random for them. But hey, I wasn't complaining. For a while, it was great. We were laughing, shouting at the TV, making fun of each other's teams just like old times. The awkwardness from the diner incident seemed to have disappeared, and I started to feel like maybe I'd been overthinking things. It was nice to just kick back, eat, and enjoy the game with my friends, without any of that weird tension hanging over us. As the game went on, we devoured most of the food. It was one of those games where you just keep eating because it's there, not even realizing how much you've consumed. The wings were killer, the nachos were loaded, and I definitely had my fair share of slices from the pizza. Mike and Jake were eating a ton too, though. If I thought they went hard at the diner, it was nothing compared to watching them tear through this buffet of snacks. But it didn't matter, it was a fun day, and I wasn't keeping track of who ate what this time. We were just three guys hanging out, watching football like we always had. By the time the game ended, I was stuffed and feeling pretty satisfied. The day had gone better than I'd expected, and it seemed like we were back to our usual dynamic. That is, until something unexpected happened. As we were lounging around after the game, half watching the post-game show, Mike stood up and said, "Hey, give me a second. I'll be right back." I didn't think much of it at first, assuming he was just going to grab something. But a few minutes later, Mike returned to the living room with a piece of paper in his hand. He sat back down on the couch, and then, almost casually, he laid the paper on the table in front of us. It was a receipt. Not just any receipt, it was a grocery store receipt, and not a small one either. It looked like it had everything they bought for that day, from the pizzas to the wings, to the 6-packs of beer, the dips, the snacks. Literally every single item on the table had been meticulously listed on that piece of paper. My first reaction was pure confusion. Why would he show us a receipt? It wasn't like we were ordering takeout or eating at a restaurant where a bill would make sense. We were at his house, watching a football game. Then, before I could even process what was happening, Mike leaned back, like this was the most normal thing in the world, and said, "All right, so we're just going to split this evenly, right?" I was stunned. I mean, I wasn't expecting this at all. For a moment, I thought it had to be a joke. We were at his house, eating food he and Jake had bought beforehand. No one said anything about paying for it. And yet, here he was, laying out this receipt like we were back at the diner, splitting a bill. It hit me all at once. This wasn't a reconciliation at all. It wasn't an attempt to make things normal again. Mike and Jake were still stuck on the whole equal share mentality. This wasn't about hanging out or patching things up. This was about them trying to make sure I paid, no matter what. I was speechless at first, just staring at the receipt as my stomach sank. I quickly scanned it over, and the total was ridiculous. These guys had gone all out at the grocery store, buying way more than we'd actually eaten. There were entire packages of things that hadn't even been opened, and suddenly, it became clear they expected me to pay for a third of the entire stockpile, not just the food I ate during the game. I tried to keep my cool, but inside, I was boiling. This wasn't fair, and they knew it. They were trying to pull the same stunt as before, only this time, they thought they'd catch me off guard. I wasn't going to let it happen again. So, instead of arguing right away, I took a deep breath and calmly said, "I'm not splitting this equally. I didn't eat even half of what's on that receipt." Mike and Jake exchanged looks, clearly annoyed that I wasn't playing along, but I wasn't backing down this time. I grabbed my phone and started calculating everything I'd eaten: 3 slices of pizza, a few wings, a handful of chips, and 2 beers. That was it. I didn't touch the charcuterie board, didn't have any of the fancy cheeses, didn't drink most of the sodas. Hell, half the stuff they'd bought was still sitting unopened on the table. Once I'd added it all up, I told them exactly what I owed based on what I'd consumed. And that's what I paid. I put the cash down on the table, stood up, and said, "I'm paying for what I ate, nothing more." Then I grabbed my jacket and left without another word. As I walked out, I could feel the tension in the air. It wasn't a full-blown argument, but it was clear that this wasn't how they'd expected things to go. They planned to box me into another situation where I'd have no choice but to pay up, thinking I'd just cave in the name of friendship. But this time, I wasn't having it. Am I a for not wanting to split the bill equally when I'm barely eating? Because honestly, it feels like I've been footing part of the bill for their massive meals for way too long, and I'm just over it at this point.